What are you most optimistic about?
I have an answer to that, all right?
We don't even know anymore what is true from what is wrong.
Because that's the business model of social media. Nothing should really be suppressed according to the free speech rules as established by the courts. They can do what the they want.
I'm just not going to sit there and watch them wipe me out.
They didn't budge and fully expected me to just step out of their way.
Well, welcome, Neil, and thank you so much for coming to my podcast. I've been so looking forward to having you on, so thank you.
Well, what's taking you so long, actually?
Oh, really? Oh, is
I've
this how
been here. I don't know about where you've been.
Oh my God, is this how we're going to play it today? Okay, I get it. Well, thank you. And thank you so much also for sending me my new copy, of the book. I had the
Yeah.
other one, and I enjoyed this version too. It was kind of, so what are the new developments between, because I was looking for it, but I couldn't locate it. So why the new version, Neil?
Oh, no. So that one, no. So you might have seen an early galley, perhaps.
Oh, that's what it was.
Yeah, that's all it was. So this is just the final printed version, where errors are corrected that were caught.
Okay. Okay.
And there's an old saying in the publishing industry: if you find a book with no errors in it, it meant no one read it. So there's always corrections you have to make, and some things that get up. So that's as best as we can do at the point of publication, and now in January, which is a year and a couple of months after the publication of the hardback, they just released the paperback. So now it's available in a lighter, cheaper version. Yeah.
Got it. That's what it was. Because I was looking, I was more, when I was reading this version, not understanding what you just explained, I thought maybe there were some ideas that have changed. So I was looking for the ideas. And
no, the ideas are pretty secure in there, only because they're developed over decades. They weren't just some up to last minute thought I put to page. Exactly. So there's some good shelf life in there. Okay. I'd like to think. Yeah.
Well, no. For sure. So we're going to be definitely touching upon the book. I'm sure also a lot of the conversation is going to be touching upon what's in the book. But Neil, the reason why I love interacting with you, I love interacting with your work, is your amazing sense of optimism. And Lord knows we need that, especially in these times, in this day and age. So my question to you is, what are you most optimistic about? And most importantly, what makes you so optimistic?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say I'm blindly optimistic. Let me temper that and suggest that I am, no, I don't like cautiously optimistic. That's too cliche. How about I'm a realist. And a lot of people, so let's go back to the glass of water, is it half full or half empty? An analogy. I have an answer to that, all right? If you are draining water from the glass and it reaches halfway, it's half empty. If you are adding water to the glass and it's halfway, then it's half full.
That's right.
All right. So all that matters is what is the direction, the vector, what is the direction of the flow of the water? And if you just come upon a glass of water that's just sitting there, then it's half empty, because if you kept watching it, eventually it would all evaporate away. So those are the answers to that question. Is it half empty or half full? There's a way to address that. So I look at trends that are positive, and even if things are bad, I can look at a positive trend within what's bad and say I look forward to the future. And that's the source of my optimism.
That's wonderful. And then in terms of optimism, what are you most optimistic about? Especially
can I give an obscure example of this? And it's part of where I first sort of developed this kind of awareness of what is good and what is bad. So in 1992, my first of several visits to South Africa. Okay. I'm in Johannesburg. And it was very early. They had not fully, if I remember my history right, they hadn't fully voted to abolish apartheid, but that was the direction. Everyone knew it was headed there. It was just a matter of documentation. And so, all right. And so I'm walking down the street. I'm not a small person. Okay. I'm not big, but I'm not No one
realistic.
ever said I was small. Okay. I'm walking down the street and there's a couple, white couple, walking towards me. And at no time do they even acknowledge that I am on the sidewalk. Now, I don't mean look at me and tip their hat. No, I'm just talking about any normal human dynamic. If you two people are walking exactly towards each other on the sidewalk, there's some awareness, your peripheral vision picks it, and you step a little to the side, not completely, you just step a little, both of you step to the side and pass each other. And that's how civilized people do this. They didn't budge and fully expected me to just step out of their way. So
Wow.
rather than cause an international incident and bust into them walking, pretending I don't see them, I stepped out of their way. And in that moment, I realized, wow,
Wow.
South Africa has a long way to go because they didn't even call me nigger. Okay, no, think about it. If you
Yeah,
call me names,
at least
you
you saw it.
recognize I'm on the street.
Yes, they saw you.
Think
Wow.
about that. If you
Wow.
are angry that I exist, that's progress over denying I exist.
Mm,
Okay? It's a weird kind of perverse progress, but it's still progress. The history of social progress will indicate. Okay?
mm,
So when I see previously ignored groups, people arguing about them or fighting over them, then I say, okay, that's a start. Okay. Whereas if you're in the middle of it and you're the one getting name called, it
mhm.
feels very low and you feel very assaulted by it. But it's
Right.
worse if they completely ignore you as though you do not exist. So
Mm,
it's those kinds of little vectors that I look for in
mhm,
society that allows
mhm.
me to say, yes, we're on a trend line and the future will be better than the past.
Wow. Very interesting. I had no idea. I mean, I yeah, some yeah. Okay, so it's a little recovery time needed here. But so going on that, when you're
You
talking
have to
about
digest what I just said, okay?
yeah, I
Digesting time.
literally
Take a
just had
sip of coffee and then we
no,
can continue.
no, I mean this is yeah, no, but you're making such a good point though. And so staying with that frame and thinking about where this country is, and today this country, when I say this country, I mean America. That's where both you and I are right now.
United
I mean,
States, yes. Mhm.
yeah, the United States. I mean, I'm in Austin. You're in New York right now. Me, literally, I feel I'm also, I'm Senegalese. Obviously, those are my roots and my bigger part of my identity, if not all of it. But in any case, America, both the US and Senegal are going to go for elections this year. I don't intend to ask you about, Senegalese intention elections because, we're a tiny country, 17, 18 million people. We're a speck in the world. But when it comes to the US, Neil, I want to tap into your sense of fairness because I would not ask this question to just anyone because I know what to expect um, and no fairness, but it's to you. I because I'm very interested in how are we going to come back together? And we can't just be happy saying, oh, you're a Democrat, you're a Republican, whatever, so we can't see eye to eye. So Neil, I want you to walk to help me understand what is it that you think Democrats have gotten wrong about Republicans, and likewise, what do you think Republicans have gotten wrong about Democrats?
No, most things. I would
Yeah.
say three-quarters of what people think are either underinformed or misinformed about the people they're arguing with. And what social media has done, I'm not, of course, the first to reveal this, social media has magnified what were previously mild differences or casual differences, the kind of differences you chat, you know, while you're walking down the street and then go have a beer, right? Those small differences have become magnified in these echo chambers of social media because that's the business model of social media. The more angered and emotionally engaged you are by whatever content it fed you, the more you will stay with it and keep feeding it. And so there's a force operating on us all that's practically outside of our control. It's because it's operating psychologically and emotionally, not intellectually and rationally. And so I'll give an example. The Republicans like to blame Democrats for raising taxes, right? Tax and spend, this sort of thing. Okay. So, well, taxes would go to the government, and then the government then spends it on things that Congress judges are priorities for the government. In the United States, the number one priority is the military, as measured by budget. And I think that's correct. It was nearly $1 trillion out of our $6 trillion budget. And then you go down from there. Okay. So if you are Republican and one of your reasons for not liking Democrats is because they might tax you, you can ask a different question. So let's say, which states of the 50 are responsible for the most tax revenue to the United States per capita? The most tax revenue. All right. 8 out of the top 10 states vote blue, typically. So basically vote Democrat. All right. So now you can ask, of the states that receive more money from the government than they pay in taxes. So what are the 10 states that have the most federal outlays back to them per capita? If you were fully in a Republican mindset, you would say to yourself, well, those would all be Democrat voting states. Of course it would be, because they're the ones that are tax and spend, and they want all social programs and everything. Okay. Well, 6 out of those 10 vote Republican, or have voted Republican in the 2020 election. Okay, to be precise. And so there are things that don't quite match up. Other things, the Republican Party cites themselves as family values, and Democrats are like not family values. And it's hard to quantify family values, but we can toss up some measures of this. How about divorce rates? Okay. If everybody's divorcing, maybe you don't have high family values. The state with the far and away lowest divorce rate in the United States is Massachusetts. And you can't get bluer than Massachusetts in voting history, just for example. And when you continue to and add to that teen pregnancies, out of wedlock pregnancies, that's another sort of measure of low family values. The states that dominate those statistics tend to be in the South, and they voted red in the 2020 election. Also, the only presidents to ever have been divorced at the time they were elected president were Republican presidents. And that includes Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump. So these tropes that we construct for, no, here's another one. Liberals like to declare that conservatives are anti-science. Okay? Anti-science. Then I say, well, what do you mean by that? And there's only 2 things you can cite, really. Okay, so one of them is there's strong resistance to the scientific research regarding climate change. In fact, built into political platforms are statements that were in denial of climate change. In the book, I give an example in the Texas Republican platform, which specifically denied the claims of climate change advocates. And they would later soften that language, by the way. And so that, which is progress. It's progress. But my point is, the liberals like to say that they're anti-science. Meanwhile, and we'll cite that as an example.
They being the Republicans.
Yes,
are anti-science.
that Republicans broadly are anti-science.
Yeah.
Well, there are a couple of ways you can try to address that. You can say, well, what has been the science budget under Republican leadership over let's say, since the Second World War, so 70 years? What is the science? That's a measure of how much science is valued within an administration,
Mhm.
with the exception of the Kennedy Johnson years, where we were going to the moon. And if we add NASA as part of that science budget, so that's an interesting fact. All the other all Republican presidents had higher science budgets than Democratic presidents.
Mhm.
All of them.
Mhm.
In fact,
Mhm.
under President Clinton, the budget for NASA is 8 years. The budget for NASA dropped. The spending power dropped by 25%.
Oh.
Okay. And at the end, it was we have to do it sort of cheaper. But better, faster, cheaper was the motto. And the rebuttal to that was pick two. Pick you can do better, faster, but not cheaper. You can do it faster, cheaper, but it's not better. Okay. So the idea that Republicans are anti-science when their budgets are higher doesn't jive. But also, where do you find homeopathy, anti-GMO, anti-pharma, where do you find the seeds of astrologers, crystal healers, feather energy, chakra alignments? Those places in society, those ways of thinking, each one of them, if you are in denial, if you're in denial of of GMOs, if you're pro all these other things, it involves some or total rejection of mainstream science associated with those subjects. And all of them have deep roots within the liberal community. I can stand next to someone in line who says, I have this homeopathic medicine. And I say, well, how much active ingredients in it? Well, there's none, but the liquid remembers that it used to have active ingredients. And so I'm taking it. Oh, okay. What do you think of Republicans? Oh, they're anti-science. And I'm thinking, what am I confronting? What? Okay. Okay. So these labels we give people, these
Yeah.
tropes, are
Mhm.
intellectually lazy,
Mhm.
and they're devoid of nuance. They're devoid, and it works both ways.
You work both
Okay.
ways.
Oh,
Both
by the
ways.
way, you could cherish your feather energy, and it will not lead to existential consequences.
Mhm.
So I'm not declaring that liberals who like their sort of new age philosophies are as dangerous to world the health and security of the world as are people who are in denial of climate change. I'm not saying these are equal weight. I'm just saying both of them require that you reject some form of mainstream science. We even have a presidential candidate, RFK Jr., who, if he looks this way, he'll tell you, trust the science on the climate change. The scientists know what they're talking about. Then we looks the other way and talks about vaccines. Don't trust the scientists on the vaccines, okay? Because
Mhm.
he's mostly anti-vaccine,
Mhm.
okay? Or
Yeah.
uh, on he's in the world of I'm not sure about vaccines. I'm just going to ask a lot of questions, leading
Mhm.
people to be suspicious of vaccines so that they would continue without it. That requires you reject some or all mainstream science associated with that topic. So people are complicated, and to me it's complicated. I'm intrigued that we have a presidential candidate who will tell you that will cherry pick what science he wants you to embrace, and what
Yeah.
he doesn't.
No.
So there's a lot of this mismatch of
Mhm.
people's thinking and how it corresponds to objective reality.
No, it's very interesting, and I guess for me, Neil, when I think about all of this, I am tempted. I'm one of those people who's tempted to always try and go back to. For me, I want to call that what happens when people are trying to do some critical thinking, right? So you may not like where they end up as they start engaging critical thinking, because I mean, I would not call myself somebody who accepts all mainstream anything. And, it's just like I look at issues issue by issue. And if history shows us anything, is that for a long time, oftentimes so-called scientists were wrong until they were right, right? And it's normal. We're out there. The way I look at our species is we're out there trying to make sense of a world, trying to make all of these discoveries. And sometimes we got it wrong, sometimes we got it right, sometimes we got it halfway wrong, halfway right, and we just need to keep it going at it. And for me, the way I look at the science, at the scientific inquiry, is to always see how can we keep pushing the boundaries. So, I mean, especially as a Black woman, we all know, that talking about the science world, there's a lot of things that they would say, oh, it's all good for you, and we know it was not good for us. So I think for me, it's all about just like calling out a sense of critical thinking, issue by issue, and kind of looking at the evidence and seeing where is it that we land. I think for me, what I have been really upset and really it really truly depressed me is I think when people have questions, we should not get into the habit of suppressing them. Because and let me bring up this example. Yesterday I was in this meeting. I can't disclose what it was, the people, because it was done the Oxford style, where whatever is in the the Chatham rules. So I cannot talk much more beyond. I can't talk about the participants, but there are some very high level people in there. Some of them physicists, some of them. I mean, we're talking really, and I sat there, Neil, and everybody has bought into one version of the story when it comes to even because we were talking about where will the migrant situation be at by 2051. And the more I heard these people talk, it was 35 of us, two of us, it seems like only a couple of us were not really in the same train of thought as the others. I definitely was one of those two. And my whole thing was, I'm sitting there and thinking, wow, it seems like all of you guys have bought this idea that by 2050, 51, maybe even if I ask you by 2100, you're living in a world in which us Africans are still going to be dirt poor. The poorest people in the world still. That's a mind frame you're working with, the social fact you're working from. And then we'll go, I want to talk to you more about the climate change thing. And so many of them have said that they agree with where the climate change, conversation is. And therefore, these are the steps we're going to take. And I look at the steps that they want to take, Neil. If those steps are taken, I, as an African person, might as well just give up. I might as well just give up on my African ancestry. I might as well give up on my African people. I might as well give up on any chance we ever will have to ever get anywhere. And that's rather distressful. And when I think of that, and I take it back maybe even to the vaccine situation, when people have questions, we have to allow them to talk about it. I think it did a huge disservice to the vaccine conversation. And you'll see that here I don't even share my views on the vaccine, and I do it on purpose. I do it on purpose because for me it's not about a fight. But people have concerns. Some of them are scared. They're hearing things from underneath, like it's not because maybe back in the days, the mainstream media did not want the world to talk about stuff. Facebook would say, if you say this about climate change or you say this about vaccine, we're going to suppress you. They can do that all they want. At the end of the day, you know us. I mean, you know humans better than anyone because you study us. You study science, biology, all of that. You know that it's not because you block everything that we're not going to find ways to communicate with each other. We will always will. But when those conversations happen in these weird spaces, in these weird rooms, I have the same thing going on with the IQ theory. It's one of the most upsetting conversations that could be had. Yet one part of our population has made it that we should not talk about it because it's just so supposedly unsavory. But we can do that all we want. People are still going to go and talk about it because it matters to them. And then it becomes these conspiracy theories. And then we don't even know anymore what is true from what is wrong. We don't know what people are hearing. And that's going to be, for me, it was my biggest criticism of how this has been handled and going forward where the world is going. So yesterday, going back to that, I was in rooms where people are reconsidering maybe the value, the merits of dictatorship. Oh, maybe we should look into dictatorship to force people to do the right thing about the environment. Maybe democracy is not the best thing to use to handle the measures that need to be taken for climate change. You see, Neil, it's just the whole thing is just so scary to me, and I'm wondering how can we go back to this place where we can put it all on the table and have these conversations, because me, I'm always talking to the honest, confused person in the back end, watching, listening. You don't hear them much, but they're trying to make sense of this. Meanwhile, everybody's just screaming at each other. So that's why I wanted to have this conversation with someone like you, because, you know, I really feel like we need to go back to what you said, nuance. And can we have nuance? Uh, so I feel like, so my I guess the question I have for you here is, let's take the vaccine thing maybe, and then I have a big one about the climate. Neil, I'm telling you, maybe I'll take the climate. I am not going to sit on the sideline and watch the message and the policies being promoted by those who have bought into climate alarmism. I'm just not going to sit there and watch them wipe me out. Because at this point, it's really what it's going to come down to. And you can ask me, what do I mean? And I can answer. But maybe this is a point where I want to segue into that whole climate thing, by the way. Because again, I won't have these conversations with people that I feel like are extreme on either end. I want to have this conversation with people because, Neil, I came from the place of once upon a time, I started believing these ideas about the climate change because, see, I'm this weird animal. I'm very much a bleeding heart. I'm very much a bleeding heart. I started out almost as a borderline communist, honestly. And the reason why I was there is because I always cared about, I hate this word, but I always cared about the underdogs because I consider us Africans to be the underdogs in this world. And so you can understand that I devoted my life to trying and seeing how can we make it not the case anymore. So so a part of me, a huge part of me, is very bleeding heart. I'm bleeding heart about the environment. I'm bleeding heart about people. I'm bleeding heart, which makes me a weird animal in the circles in which I am. But the reason why I'm in the circles in which I am, which are more, pro freedom, pro liberty, is because of what I came to understand through my life journey. But I digress. All of this just to say, anytime I hear environment, climate, nature, earth, what's going on, who is touching Mother Earth? So I started believing everything that I was told. Once upon a time, I found myself being anti-nuclear energy, not weapons, of course, nuclear weapons. I mean, but eventually, I started doing my homework, and I'm seeing like conflicting information. And so I want to know from you where you stand on that, and I want to see if maybe you can help me. Um, I want to hear from you. I want to hear from you because I'm collecting my data still. So I want to hear from you. I'm not well, I take that back. I'm not collecting my data still. I'm curious. I want to know how someone like you feels about the whole climate change and use of gas and stuff like that in Africa. So sorry, thank you for listening to me on this one, but
Okay.
you can see it's weighing on me. It's weighing on my heart, Neil. It's weighing on my heart.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. That felt cathartic for you to get all of that out. That's what it felt. So I need to back up to some earlier points you made just to lay down a proper landscape. The way science works is not how you described. Okay.
Okay.
There's an important distinction between science and every other activity in the human condition and in human civilization. And that is science has the unique ability with its methods and tools to establish objective truths in the world. No other means of exploring the world comes close to it in its ability to do this. And the objective truths using the methods and tools of science developed primarily, there were indications of these methods and tools earlier, but they didn't become widespread until around 1600, the year 1600. So we've been invoking the methods and tools of science basically for the past 400 years. All right. And So what does it involve? If you have an idea about how the world works, then you propose a way to test it. Okay. And if the test is consistent with your idea, you say, that's good. Well, maybe you're biased. Maybe you were half asleep when the data came in. Maybe your wall plug currents were different from what you needed to make the proper measurements. So you get someone else to do the experiment. If their results match yours, statistically matches yours, then you say, all right, get someone to design a different experiment that's looking for the same result. If the different experiment, hey, that's good. Now you get someone who's a competitor of yours to test it, and they get about approximately the same result. When this repeats, the methods and tools of science have established a new objective truth about the world. And those objective truths are not one day later shown to be false. We're not going to one day wake up and say, well, maybe E equals MC cubed. Let's do some more research. That's not going to happen. That's not how the science works. We're not going to say, maybe the sun is actually a big cube of ice instead of a ball of roiling gas, hot gas. Okay? They're results of science that are fundamental to how nature works, to our understanding of how nature works. Okay. On the frontier, the science results change daily. The scientists are arguing with each other all the time.
Mm-hmm.
On the frontier. This is
Mm-hmm.
why we have journals. This is why we have scientific conferences.
Mm-hmm.
You go to a conference and people think that we're just sitting there with our legs up on the chair, basking in our mastery of the universe. Yeah, there's the
But isn't
stuff
that
that we're
true? Isn't that true? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
so, so that's true for some of it, yes. But any active scientist is at the chalkboard or whatever they're made of today, the whiteboard. They're at the drawing board, establishing what they think is the pathway to the next objective truth. Okay,
Right.
so that's a very important fact here. So your comment, well, scientists have thought something was true and then we found something else is true. Not since 1600. No. Unless the press
You don't think we
finds
go
a
deeper?
scientific, hold on. Here's what happens,
Yes,
which
tell me.
maybe leads you to think this and others. Somebody publishes a research result
Mm-hmm.
that's a little intriguing,
Mm-hmm.
but it hasn't been verified by anybody yet. It just gets published. The press sees it, headlines. And then everybody thinks that's the new truth. No, it's not. It might be, but it's not established as such until other reports confirm it. And if other reports can't confirm it, then it's not a result. And
So
it's
what
to
you're
be.
saying? So what you're saying is, you're seeing that, and
Oh,
maybe
wait,
you're.
and then the public sees
Uh-huh.
some other results that says,
Uh-huh.
no, that first result is wrong. And then they'll
Right.
say, well, what do scientists know? They're changing their mind every few minutes. Cholesterol is good for you. Now it's bad for you. You should eat carbs. No, don't eat carbs. These are research results on the frontier. And you're trying to align your entire life around the results of one. The press would have you do that.
Yeah.
But then you see other research results because it's an active area of research.
So
Okay?
this is no. This makes it makes. Thank you, by the way, for making those clarification for people listening and myself included. So basically, what I'm hearing you say is what you're saying is that um, what you're saying is that the scientists are doing the work that scientists do. They're out there, they get to a certain truth, and then but they keep working because we need to keep going further and further in our understanding, of systems and things. Um, and that pushing the envelope further is what you call the fringe, the edges, and
Not, yeah, fringe is different. Fringe is like what you're doing is weird. Okay.
okay, maybe we don't use that word, but what I mean by that is like the cutting
The
edge. So
moving frontier. Yeah, the
frontier,
bleeding edge. Yes.
bleeding edge, yes, the bleeding edge, the frontier. Yeah, so they're doing what they're supposed to do, which is exactly that. Just keep pushing it. But what you're saying, and maybe going back to what you said earlier about what do you call it? the phenomenon even of social media. What you're saying is, in a way, and I guess it's the same thing about law and everything. It seems like our culture is a little bit, the tools that our culture gives us takes us ahead of where the scientists are, because their process normal, it does take time. There's going to be the scientific process takes time, where us, it's almost like they did this, they found something, they don't know for sure, but it's interesting to look into. But then the rest of us take it leaks almost from their labs, and then the rest of us take it and start to make all types of big plans based on that, as if it was truth already, and when they have not said it is yet proven. We have not even done the
And somebody else gets a different result, and then people choose sides based on whose
sides.
result was floating in the air at that
Yeah,
moment. And
I
they
definitely see that happening.
and especially in social media, people will be very strenuously defending
Hmm.
what feels good to them if they
Hmm.
find a result that agrees.
Makes sense.
So that's the first response that I want to offer you
Hmm.
to um, your excursion there with your perceptions of the world. Another very important point is that our species is our brain wiring is ill equipped to handle probability and statistics. It's just pure and simple. Okay. It's not anyone's fault. It's, as best as I can judge, we're just bad at it. We are so bad at it that entire industries have risen up to exploit how bad we are at it. And they're called casinos. Okay. You go into a casino thinking you're coming out with more money than you went in. Okay. And you'll hear stories of people. I won 3 times, and you hear that, you say, "Wow, I'm gonna go in there so that I can duplicate this." This is part of the delusions, the statistical delusions that consume our what would otherwise be rational thought. Okay, so this has consequences other than whether you choose to go into a casino or not, and the consequences are: how do you deal with risk? Okay. How do you deal with risk? So, a vaccine, let's take vaccines as an example here. And it doesn't apply to anything, but vaccines is a very clean example to give here. They find a vaccine that is 90% effective, whatever number, it won't matter. Let's just say 90% effective, okay, at preventing transmission or reducing or keeping you out of the hospital. There's some claim associated with that 90%. All right. So then what happens? One person comes up to you and says, I took the vaccine and I still got sick. I was sick as a dog. So you shouldn't take the vaccine. Well, maybe that person is in the 10%. Okay. But because it is a eyewitness testimony, what human to human interaction swamps our understanding of statistics and probability. The reality of a person sitting in front of you giving you contrary information to a statistic has the power to override your ability to interpret that statistic. And advertisers know this, okay? But it's in their favor. So they could just show you a bar chart that shows that their product is better than other charts. But that never works because it's statistics. They'll show a person who say, I used this product and it changed my life and I lost 50 pounds and I did this. And you're going to listen to that person and you're not going to look at the bar charts. And even if you did, you're not going to feel it. Okay? That's why in my field, in the physical sciences, we take classes in probability and statistics for years and years and years. I probably had 6 years all total throughout my college. Well, high school. I went to a science-based high school, so I had statistics there. But in college and in graduate school, all of this combined gives me some ability to override my emotional reaction to a statistic. So we live in a world where you're going to believe your friend before you're going to believe a dispassionate bit of data that's reported to you.
So then,
You've
Neil.
also commented.
Uh-huh. No,
Okay,
but
so
before,
I just want
before we
to
move
I
on.
want to put that in context. And one other point, which will
Uh-huh.
sort of complete my response to your critique of science.
Oh, I am not
There was
criticizing science, Neil. I am not. I
no
will.
methods into it. No, I get it. I don't want to
No, 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 no,
misrepresent
no.
you, but
Okay,
you had
okay. So
to
Neil,
your observations of science, not your critique, to your
no, no, no.
observations of science. So one
So
other.
Neil, no, Neil. I have to correct that before we move forward. I think
Oh, please, please.
yeah, no, uh, it's unfortunate that my comment made it sound like I was, criticizing science for science. That's not where I came from. So let me maybe clarify. Where I am having what I was alluding to is the fact that, and what you explained just right now was really great. So, but both you and I know that the cat is not going to go back in the bag. The cat is out of a bag, never going back. We have communication tools that we could complain about all day, all we want. My issue with social media is not so much about that; it has to do with what it does to kids in general. So I have my issue with social media, but for different reasons. But this idea of people now being, way more connected than ever before, information flying around in wild and at a crazy rate, is not. I don't see a world in which we're going to be able to take that back. I wouldn't even say that I want that to change per se. So my point has to do with when all of this is out there, when the scientists are doing their work, the bleeding edge sciences keep on happening. Somehow information leaks out. They have not reached, like it has not been
Consensus,
replicated,
research
shown.
consensus. Yeah.
Yeah, or shown to
Mhm.
exactly. None of it has happened yet. The rest of us run with information. Then we apply, bias selection to everything that we hear. All of that stuff is happening. My point is, all of that stuff is happening, and um, so for me, I guess everything I was trying to bring up earlier, that's why I told you. Remember, I said, you're not going to know from me, I'm sure if you research, you'll know where I stand on the vaccine thing. But I did my own homework, and I looked at where I stand about it for myself and my family. Both my husband and I decided what is it that we're going to go for him, for me. Anyway, so my point is, I'm not so much, to me, it's not so much about what has come out. It's about these forces are out there. People are going to do what people do. How do we, how can we move forward in a way that folks don't feel that they're just being suppressed, or worse, suppressed in the name of, oh, you guys are just dumb, you don't know what you're doing,
Yeah, I
you
was
don't
working
know.
my way up to that because that was all
Oh,
part of your full
sorry, but
discussion.
I just wanted to say I was not criticizing science per se. I'm
Okay,
more
you're
criticizing.
observing science. You're observing
Well,
it,
I'm,
and
I'm more criticizing where we have gotten, and how do we allow people to be part of a scientific process without just telling the rest of us, "You're so stupid, go home. You don't know what you're
right.
talking about," and trying to tell us that we can't even talk about anything
Yeah,
because
yeah, I'm getting
supposedly.
there.
Go ahead.
I'm getting there. Okay, so part of our ability to empower ourselves
Yeah.
is the mantra, do your own research. Okay, study this because you can make a decision that you're comfortable with for yourself and for your
Right.
loved ones.
Right.
So that became a mantra, especially in the era of the internet. And what that created was a world where you can have um, hundreds and in some cases thousands of medical doctors produce research that give a result. Okay. And this then becomes what I use the term mainstream. The mainstream is a result that is not linked to any single researcher. Okay. Because any single researcher can have a bias, can have a worldview that influences it. The mainstream is, what do the majority of research results give you? And there will always be fringe results around that. Okay. So here's what happens. it got people to show, it got people. So this idea of do your own research is they'll see the mainstream, and then they'll see a person who might even have pedigree say the mainstream is wrong. Here's what you need to know. That is irresistible clickbait on social media. Anyone who says they don't want you to know this, they all are, but I have the answer. Oh my gosh, of course you're clicking on that, because it's like they have my interest in mind, and they're a human being, and I can see their face and I can see their expressions. The mainstream doesn't have a face. It's hundreds, if not thousands, of researchers publishing research articles, and they don't have a face. There's a statistic that comes out the end of that. Okay, so we have this cold statistic and this person who says they're acting in your interest. And so the person who, quote, does their own research is finding these things that resonate with what they kind of want to be true anyway, or they don't want to do something, they find something that supports what they don't want to do in spite of mainstream research results. And so you end up with the something that I said in my master class. I didn't know when I said it that it was actually a researched, known, named phenomenon. Okay, what I said in my research in my classes, one of the great um, uh, uh, one of the great challenges we face in on the internet, especially, but in this world, is knowing enough about a subject to think you're right,
Mm.
but not enough about the subject to know you're wrong.
Mm.
Okay, I would later learn that that's a research phenomenon. It was called the Dunning-Kruger effect,
Mm.
where a little bit of knowledge that someone gains, they have a level of confidence that is incommensurate with their actual knowledge, but it's a feeling. Yeah, I know. I spent 2 hours on YouTube doing this. Okay. And then the more they learn, then they realize how much they actually didn't know. And so then their confidence drops until they learn much, much more. And then the confidence comes back again. We're
Mm.
stuck in that. And
Mm.
so what I'm asserting is
Mm.
that the school system needs vastly more training of the students in probability and statistics so that when confronted with scientific data, they will know how to think about it, how to interpret it, and not how to cherry pick it.
Got it.
Because the cherry picking is what the gambler does when they hear the slot machine hit jackpot. They say, "Oh, that's going to be me," because
Mhm.
that's a visible thing. That's 1 in 100,000 people who walked in there that day, or 1 in 1 million, but that's going to be me. The
Mhm.
delusions of self take
Mhm.
over the rationality of the data and of the statistic. So, okay, so now to bring closure to all of the topics you raised
Mhm.
is once we have reliable scientific data,
Mhm.
it's an entire other question of how that applies to policy, to geopolitics, to society. That's where you need politics. But when a politician says there is no global warming, you're wasting everybody's time because you're fucking wrong. Okay? And so so recognize what are objective truths out there. Start there. Now ask yourself, are there carbon credits? Are there this? Or if we do this, and the United States built its entire industrial revolution on coal and oil and polluted the atmosphere, okay? And
Mhm.
now the country's trying to rise up, and that's their cheapest access to power, and you want to suppress that? What is that fair? Who wins? Who does? Those are political conversations. And you can have a scientist in those conversations, but the scientist's politics should be no higher or lower than other people's politics if it's just politics. But the science itself, the more politicians argue about the science, the more we are delaying actual solutions to actual problems.
So, two couple of things before going into that. So when I go back to what you said about, for you, the solution to the issue of the cat being out of a bag, information is going to come out, is going to come out. What scientists are coming up with at the bleeding edge, some of that information, they're just going through the normal process. They haven't reached a conclusion yet on X or Y, issue. But the rest of us are getting all of this, and it's just flying around, and we're making decisions. And you're saying your solution to that is for humans to be better equipped, and you're saying our school systems got to do better. And
Yeah, and by the way, that plugs back into your very important point, which is the reason why we can complain that Facebook suppressed uh, 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 uh,
whichever
postings.
position, whichever position.
Okay, yeah, yeah, and all right. So, did anyone ever say this private company is a center of the freedom of speech? I don't think anyone ever said that when it was founded. But if we want to think of it that way, then sure, then nothing should really be suppressed according to the free speech rules as established by the courts some decades ago. Free speech is fine as long as it doesn't incite felonious violence, right? So all right, get it. So now watch. If everyone knew how to interpret information, you wouldn't need that. Facebook would not feel the need to protect people by removing posts that give misinformation that could lead to more deaths. Okay, so with the misinformation, we are susceptible to misinformation because we don't know how to think about scientific data. That's the problem. So that's why I'm saying if we were trained from the beginning and we see one person passionately saying this will all kill you, and then you see the mainstream results in published journals that are verified saying the opposite, you don't go to the person who's got the charismatic YouTube channel. That is not how we establish objective truths in this world. And you would know that, and none of those people would be in business.
No, and I on that part we agree. Where I don't agree necessarily with you, Neil, is
I didn't say
I
anything to agree or disagree with.
no,
I'm just giving you information here.
no,
I swear I didn't say anything that was an
no, no.
opinion for you to agree or disagree with.
I'll tell you what I disagree with,
Okay.
or where I feel like there is a slippery slope. Um, I am in line with you. That's why I remember when we were talking about this earlier. For me, at least, you call it people need to be better trained in statistics.
Oh
Um,
yes.
for
If
me, and
we need to be better trained, if we're going to handle
we're gonna
statistical information that comes from science.
got it. We're on the same page with that. I
Oh, by
for
the way,
me,
and casinos will go out of business overnight. So it's not.
well, that wouldn't be a bad thing. That wouldn't be a bad thing as far as I'm concerned. But
Uh-huh.
I am with you in terms of that's why I brought up the word critical thinking. I guess knowing how to interpret statistics for me is part of critical thinking as well. And then there are other
Yes,
things in
it's a
there.
centerpiece.
Yeah, so we're in the same page on that, and I'm a big believer because, as a matter of fact, if you hear me talk anywhere, I will say that I blame our education system for not having brought up kids who are better, people who are better trained. That's where I stand. You're going back by saying, yeah, the schools have to do a better job. I am right there with you. And beyond the school, another question I might have for you, but maybe that's going to be for another day because I want to go into some other things. But I'm still not clear about what do we do about the adults of today. So hopefully the schools do a
I
good
know.
job. But
Yeah,
also,
there's a time delay. You can fix the
you know
school.
what?
You got to wait 30 years till they become
Exactly. Right,
a
right. But
politician.
we're gonna start somewhere. We're gonna start somewhere. So the kids, hopefully,
Okay.
that's going to be taken care of. And I sure hope, Neil, you're out there using your influence to get this type of stuff into the curriculums because I think
Okay.
it's so important.
Where do you
But
disagree with me? I didn't think I said anything that could be
I will tell
disagreed
you
with.
where I disagree. Well,
Yeah, please.
where were you saying we have companies like Facebook, companies? I don't care if it was to be Facebook or whichever company it is.
Yeah, it wouldn't matter.
I
There's plenty of
Yeah,
platforms. Yeah.
I personally don't want to live in a world where some group of people decided of what is it that I get to see or not. And I understand what you're saying. The information might kill. When you say the information
Right, media
might,
has always been that. That's what television always was. That's what
I
radio.
understand. But didn't you
They're
just say?
controlling what you hear, what you see, what you think.
But Neil, when you said XX company, and you used one of them, I won't say the name again, XX company decided that if this was not happening, a company like Facebook, let's say, a company like Facebook would not feel the need to suppress information, to suppress information. I think in doing that, I think that's my point. I feel that part was done wrong. Maybe it would have been better to just say, hey, you're listening to this, but know that there is other sources that are completely at the opposite of
It
this.
was done in the
For me,
interest of public health.
excuse me?
It was done in the interest of public health, which is a
I
contract
understand,
that
I understand, I understand
right,
I
right, right.
understand.
That's a contract that we
Mhm.
all have signed by agreeing to live in society.
I
Okay.
agree,
Okay.
Neil. I agree with that part. Where I think where you don't see where I'm coming from is I agree with that part. The part that I still disagree with is, especially if this is the and I don't need to sign, by the way, a contract to know to live by such virtue of
Yeah.
we should all always do the best we can to preserve life. But my point is, I go back
Civil
to it,
life.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
I go back to it. To me, it was just done the wrong way, because when they started suppressing and people started talking to each other, oh, something is suppressed, you were actually feeding that sense of, conspiracy, So all I'm saying
I'm
is,
not. Wait. Just to be
okay,
clear. Hold on. Just to be clear. Oh, by the way, the urge to think there's a conspiracy is part of the susceptibilities we have, not understanding probability and statistics.
agreed,
So
agreed,
there's a profound susceptibility we all have to that kind of thinking, and that's why their entire magazines, they're not on all shelves, but they exist, that are trying to train people's uh, train train you how to be a skeptic. A skeptic is not doubting everything. A skeptic is realizing when something might not be true because of who is putting forth the information. I'm not defending Facebook. I'm simply saying that that's a private company. They can do what the fuck they want, okay? Unless we all agree that they're not a private company. And if they're not a private company, then the government has control over what they do. So I'm not here to vote for what Facebook should or should not have done.
no,
I
no,
don't
no, no,
even
no,
care. I care
no,
about people. I care
yeah,
about people.
and
Yeah,
that's why, and both you and I care about people. This is why and both you and I care about people, and both you and I know that the massive amount of population people out there have the traits that you mentioned. We don't understand statistics. We also have our own wiring working against us, to kind of figure all of this out. And
yeah.
my point is, all I was trying to get to with you is, what should we do with the humans of today? And the answer cannot be whether done by the government or by Facebook or a private company. The answer, I don't think, can be about, we're just going to suppress some of the stuff we know they're going to hear about and just force feed them this because we have determined it is the truth, whether it's the truth or not. But again, I'm not even arguing that. But my point is, this is what's going on, and I just don't think that suppressing, whether coming from the government or from the private sector, is going to help. So I'm saying, Neil,
Yeah, they didn't trust people to
you
think
understand this better.
rationally.
Yeah, you
They
who
didn't
understand
trust people.
humanity.
Well,
Yeah,
hold on.
you understand humanity. Tell us
They
how.
didn't trust people to make correct decisions in the interest of public health. That's why they did it. I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm just telling you that's
I'm
why they
asking
did
you
it.
this. I know that, but now my question to you, Neil, because
Sure.
I love to hear what you think, because
Hmm.
you're a person of interest to me. Uh, what would you suggest if you had a
I would
magic
rather
wand?
we educate people so that that's not necessary.
I agree with that, but the
And
people
I'm
of
an
today.
educator, so that's what I spend my whole life doing.
Okay, so then you're saying that the adults of today, basically, we just have to go and turn your channel and we listen to you, and maybe we'll. And I'm not saying it's wrong. I mean, I'm listening to you, but the
But
thing
what
is,
Facebook could have done, there are other ways they could have done this.
there we
Had
go.
they understood human behavior better, they would have realized that if you ban certain things, that excites people even more. Okay. And so that's an emotional reaction to a ban. It's like ban books. Oh, what books are they? I want to go read them.
Exactly,
Right. So they
exactly.
didn't understand, which is odd because they're all about knowing human behavior in their advertising business model. But so what they could have done was had forums, okay, where they show what scientists say and why there's a consensus and how many lives have been saved by vaccines over the centuries, the 2 or 3 centuries that we've had them, and what value they could have had educational platforms to educate people so that you're equipped to know what to think when someone says all the medical doctors are wrong and I'm right because look at this person here. Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, we need to be equipped. And see, right, in a free country where nothing should ever be withheld, for sure. Otherwise, it's not a free country. It might as well be a dictatorship. By the way, by the way, uh, one of just to as long as we're on the subject, one of my books, uh, my war book, it's accessory to war, the unspoken alliance between astrophysics and the military. That book is a big fat book. I have a co-author, Avis Lang, a longtime editor of mine. Uh, we so that book was translated, as many books are, into other languages. It came time for it to be translated into simplified Chinese. Okay, that's what it's called. All right, and they came back and said, okay, you need to change these paragraphs or delete and delete these other paragraphs for us to translate it. And I looked at it and okay, the China is a huge marketplace, financially. It's a huge marketplace for sales. And I look at it and I say, well, these are changes. This is weird. This is not. And my co-author said, Neil, this is bad. We shouldn't do this. We shouldn't agree to any changes. And I said, well, if we don't agree, then no one in China sees any part of the book. Isn't it better that they see some of the book than if not? And then my wife told me, she said, Neil, she has a PhD in mathematical physics, my wife. She said, Neil, these are not just simply abridgments, okay? Where you'd say, oh, this is an abridged. These are expurgations. And I said,
Now, for
oh,
those of us who don't, what is explain that word
okay,
differently?
sure. So an abridgment is you have to remove content to make it fit. Okay. An abridged encyclopedia is a shorter version of the longer one. An abridged dictionary is a shorter version of the total dictionary. So abridged is just shorter. Expurgated is I don't like this information and I want you to change it or delete it. And when she used the term expurgate, it was like, oh, yes, oh my gosh, I will not agree to this. So that book was not translated into Chinese. And I was reminded that they do not live in a free country over there because information is channeled, edited, and filtered before it even reaches their eyes and ears. And I think to myself, I grew up in what I like to think of as a free country, and any steps that constrict that, that's a different kind of system of government. And I
Yeah.
don't think I'd be happy about that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I mean, that's all I wanted to hear from you. So what you're saying is, you agree that things, information handling could have been done differently, and I would have added
Yeah, I
to
think
what you
that's
were
how.
saying.
I mean, it in hindsight, I think
Yeah,
that's how they should have
yeah,
done it.
yeah,
But again,
yeah.
they're a private company; they do what they want,
No, they
unless
can
they're
do whatever
not a
they want,
private company.
and
Well,
they can do whatever
private,
they
I
want.
mean, they're
Mhm.
not a government. Uh,
Yeah, no, no,
the-
I hear you. I hear you. And
mhm.
then to the town hall you were talking about, I think also using those town halls to bring people who are using the bleeding edge information to the people who are saying, oh, did you know about this? So anyway, so we're, in the, we're I'm glad you explained that one more. Thank you. So the next thing I wanted to ask about is on the climate change, Neil. So the stuff is out there, so I'm going to just spell out so people don't not be like, what is she talking about? There's a climate,
Okay.
so in the name of climate change, Neil, very many environmentalists are out there promoting the radical, suppression of fossil fuels, pretty much. And when you look at the timelines they're giving in humans' time, it's almost like tomorrow we have to turn the faucet off. And me as an African, I sit there and I say, Americans need to decide for Americans what they're going to do about the climate change. Some people might argue and say, no, 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 it's a global problem, so we cannot just limit it to our atmosphere, to our borders. And but anyway, I'm a firm believer of let nations and citizens do, come together and do what they need to do. But in this case, the anti-climate fossil fuel zealots, as I call them, are out there saying we gotta no fossil fuel. Fossil fuel is just not an option for going forward, and they're using the power and influence, especially in this case, non-profit NGOs like Greenpeace and company, now helped by the ESG movement. And it's like, we are not going to finance, for example, any fossil fuel infrastructure in Africa, right? And I'm sitting there saying, so you're telling me that the African women's only choice, and by the way, these are the ones, when you think about indoor air, about pollution, which is where most of the deaths are coming from when it comes to climate change, you follow pollution. Within pollution, it's primarily indoor air pollution that we're talking about. And there, it's 1 to 2 million African women who are dying every single year simply because they're literally frying their lungs, using biomass of sorts to cook food. So the anti-fossil fuel people are telling me basically that the only choice these women have is use the solar stoves that most African women will tell you don't work. They don't want it. Most of the time you find it just like left in some field. So her choice is use this stuff or die. And I'm sitting there, Neil, and I'm just saying, we gotta be better than that. We surely can be better than this. So what I've been doing is one by one, lining them up and asking, do you believe that's the only choice these women should have, or somewhere in between? Could we all rally and say, until renewables become become reliable and affordable, until that happens, we agree that you African women should at least have a right to use propane because it's so much cleaner than the biomass that you're using. That way, save your lives and save the lives of your children. I don't know if people know this, but you have kids 4 years old, 5 years old, some crazy cancers simply because they were born to families that don't have enough money to cook in a more clean way. So this is places where, Neil, I'm just like, can we take a step back and not just be so black and white about everything, and just be a little bit more sensitive and sensible about this particular issue? And I'm bringing it to you because this particular issue has been my fight for the past few years. It's been including to my fight for a prosperous Africa, because as you know, what I want to see, Neil, by the time I leave this earth, is to know that my continent has taken a shift for the better, knowing that this continent that is the youngest in the world, 19 years in average, by 2050, a quarter of the human population will be African. It's the optics cannot be that this will be, the poverty that we know today. It just can't be that way. And so for poverty to be poverty solved by prosperity, meaning our entrepreneurs are the ones who build prosperity. So, but they need two things. They need an environment in which they can start and run businesses, and they need access to reliable and affordable energy. If you deprive us of either one of those two, the prosperity we all so badly crave and deserve will be taken away from us. So here I'm looking to someone like you to help us with on the climate change part, because the activists are out there and they're having dreadful consequences, on policies that affect us directly, halfway across the world. The decisions made in New York, in Paris, in Tokyo will decide as to whether or not we get a chance to get out of this mess or not. So, Neil, please, what's your stance on this?
I don't take stances. I'm not a stance person.
So you
I
don't.
am a
So you don't.
scientist that
Mhm.
report on objective truths,
So
but I don't take stances.
okay,
First of all, second,
okay.
um, in my read of history, unless there's a dictatorship in a free society, it's very hard to get everyone to shift in their ways of living, unless it is motivated by some other force that is not just somebody telling them to change. Okay, it could be motivated by something economic. It could, okay, how do I get everyone to watch television? Well, I first invent television, I put really cool stuff on it, and then I make it a price that everybody can afford. Okay, so between 1950 and 1960, we went from near zero ownership of televisions to near 100% ownership of televisions. That's how a change was implemented in the American society, because forces outside of, you should get a TV. What is a TV? I don't know. I don't need a TV. I have my radio here. All of a sudden, an entire new thing descended on us. Other weird examples, but they all come together. Um, Whales were a major commodity, financial, economic commodity in this world, especially in the United States. Whale oil was the primary source of lamps and heating and this sort of thing. Okay. Surely there were people saying we shouldn't be killing these magnificent creatures. They're the largest animals on Earth. What are we doing here? This is, that was not going to succeed until there was something else to replace it.
Yeah.
Okay. So, oh my gosh, there's oil in the ground. I dig a hole, oil just spews forth. I don't have to have whaling ships putting my life at risk. I don't have to hunt another living creature that may, in fact, be smarter than we are. Okay. I can just pull oil out of the ground. That basically killed the whaling industry, no pun intended there, and created an entire other industry, and people adopted it overnight, practically.
Overnight. Yeah.
Overnight. Okay. Let's give another example. 1905. Any photos of the streets of New York City? You can do this anywhere, but New York City was well photographed at the time. Nothing but horse-drawn carriages. 1905.
Yeah.
By 1915, you couldn't give away a horse. These are horses that have been with us for thousands of years. Horses, we literally and figuratively built civilization on the backs of horses. All right?
The car. Yeah.
Now, the early people would have said, no, I'm not going to give up my horse. I know when I feed it, it's going to work. And I know the car comes out. Boom. Boom. You don't have to, well, it takes gas, but it's not a living thing. You have to worry about its health and okay? You couldn't give away a horse. That happened within a 10-year span. Okay. My read of history and the rapid shift of people's behavior and what they value being brought about because of the convenience and economics of something else that lands on the scene tells me that we will not, in fact, succeed in going to renewables until, as you said, renewables are affordable and transportable, affordable, distributable, and affordable. Did I leave anything out? All of the above. So that I'm going to say, don't use your gas, your propane or methane. Use this, and it's a solar thing you put up. It's free because it's the sun or whatever. There's a wind turbine, and your life is better because of it. You will otherwise. I do not expect people to otherwise change their ways, and so the climate activists, and this is true basically for all activists that I've met, who want you to change your behavior to match theirs because they know what the future of the world requires and you're not buying into it. Well, you still want to survive. What a luxury it is to say, I choose to not do this and I'll spend more on this other thing. That's a luxury of wealthy nations. And you implied that in your comment. People in Tokyo, Paris, in the United
US?
States are making decisions that'll affect the rest of the world if it's done in some kind of UN pact where poor countries and rich countries, it's the rich countries that were built on coal saying the future can't be coal. Yet they've built their wealth on the carbonaceous backbone of those molecules. So yeah, so we need highly inventive, innovative. We need innovators to come up with renewable energy sources that will make it people's choice to grab it rather than be forced. And I don't think we're there yet.
No,
And you know
and
what
that's
could solve it
and
all?
that's
Wait,
the
wait,
word
wait,
when.
wait, wait. One other thing. Okay. You know what cars did in early New York? They got rid of the manure problem. There was a
Yes,
manure
totally.
everywhere.
Yes,
Flies were reproducing the
imagine.
manure, and this is before
Yeah,
supermarkets. So people were selling food open in the streets.
yeah,
Flies were everywhere as a health problem.
yeah,
Okay, how do you solve the manure problem?
yeah.
You invent a car. Okay, that's how you solve the manure problem. So,
Right, that's
so
right.
what intrigues me is the future of geoengineering,
Hmm.
where there's some very small progress on what they call CO2 scrubbers, where right at where you have the power plants, you have these apparatus that takes the CO2 out of the air and buries it back in the ground where it had come from when we pulled it out in the first place. If we have CO2 scrubbers, we could burn all the fossil fuels we want because we're in control of the CO2 in the environment. All right. So these are solutions that are not just simply stop your habits that have been keeping you alive your entire life.
So no, I at least I'm glad to hear you say what you said, because for me the key word in all the things that you said, it's not there yet. Meanwhile, we have living people, in this case Africans, who have to figure out a way to keep on going by, unless you're asking them to just lay somewhere
The
and
rich
die.
nations need as equally as a high priority a way to make it affordable and transportable so that it can be distributed every place where they're otherwise using fossil fuels. And if the, that is a moral, economic, and social duty that they should carry with them in addition to their calls for the banishment of fossil fuels.
Um,
For sure.
well, no, for me, I am thinking about the Africans of today. Do I support the technology and research looking for a way to help us transition to renewables? Of course, I support that. But what I have an issue with is in the meanwhile, activists sitting out there and saying no more fossil fuels,
They need
and
to
those,
fund innovative solutions
they need to do that. But in the
if they
meantime,
want to have the outcome they seek. Yes.
exactly. And but that's for the future. In the meantime, for today's women living in Africa today, they cannot be standing in the way of African women having access to propane, because it is cleaner than coal or the biomasses that they're using. For me, that's what it is. There's an incremental over there that's right there available to these women, and their zealotry stands in the way of even doing that increment that, in this case, actually saves lives. So for me, that's the moral urgency that I am not seeing them have. They could care less, and that's why I'm at war with the climate, with
Yeah,
the
and
anti.
not to make light of this, but that's called politics. And so uh, it's politics until someone invents something that solves it, and then it's science and engineering. But until there's a science and engineering solution, yeah, we have to rely on our own rational capacity for rational thought to come up with political solutions that maximize public benefit.
Well,
And
I'm not sure what that means, because I what for me it's very what I see that's very clear is some people today, because today renewables are not where they need to be in order to be, something to be a viable option. Today, some people are using biomass, which is killing them at the rate of 1 to 2 million a year. We're talking about the poorest among us African women who are dying at a rate of 1 to 2 million a year. That could switch in no time if they had access to propane. That might not do much that might not be something that the activists want to hear. But that move from coal and biomass to propane, that incremental move alone could save 1 to 2 million lives right now. Then I have a problem with you telling me, and no, I don't care. I don't care, because still that propane. what does it mean for Earth? So she can die for all I know. So that's more, Neil, what I'm trying to
That's what you're dealing
get
with.
at.
Yeah, I get it. But I'm saying these are, uh, yes, they're bringing science to the table, the science of climate change and the predictions for what effects it will have on the world. But sure, but like I said, solutions to that come from behind closed doors or in front of closed doors by competing factions of how you might solve this problem. And
So
we
Neil,
have
so
that.
Neil, are you saying? So Neil, are you saying? So what I want to hear from you is, do you believe that again that future we want to get to where renewable, we have sources that don't affect the environment? And by the way, I'm a proponent of nuclear energy, but that's a whole other conversation. We don't have to go there. So my point is, while we work on this future that could make the activists happy from the climate standpoint, while we work on that future, which I have no problem working towards that future, absolutely none. None. I said earlier,
People
I'm
need
my
to
own.
convince the activists to redouble
I'm, sa-
efforts
I'm
to
saying in the
make these.
meantime, yeah, in the meantime, I am trying to just hear, am I the one who is crazy thinking that in the meantime, it should be okay to say to these women, the biomass you're using is killing you, switch over to propane. It might not be what we like to hear for the climate, but you switch over to propane, save your life right now while we're working for that bigger, for that, other future. Is that something that's unrealistic to want? Or am I out to lunch? Or is there something else out there that,
What people need, based on my knowledge of politics and what happens when people of differing opinions sit around a table, is what if you want to be effective, because that's what my father used to say, it's not good enough to be right. You
Mhm,
have to also be effective. To be
mhm.
effective, somewhere in there needs to be a transition plan. Okay. You can't just say, I just want to use propane so that I don't die from burning biomass. All right. It's we will use propane for this amount of time on the expectation that there is a replacement to the propane because we all agree that using fossil fuels is bad for the environment. Okay,
Well,
some
yeah.
arc so that the activists hear that you ultimately want to land where they are. If they don't
Well,
hear that, then you're the enemy. This is
well,
just
I so then
interpersonal politics.
so then I'm going to be the enemy for as long as they want, because my point is they're working on a future and I'm working on people today, and I would like to think you talked about us having a civil a social contract, among us humans, and I would like to think that that contract is first order of the day is do no harm, do no evil. And for me it starts with we leave no person behind. These women dying right now should not be dying right
I,
now.
I, I,
I mean,
I'm not
I would
denying
like to
any of
think
that.
we have an
I,
agreement
I'm
on
just
that, Neil,
suggesting,
and that
based.
doesn't only work if only, you're my future, the future that I want, the future that I see. You have to tell me that you agree with that. Which part of clean energy? I have no issue. Me, I am, like I said, clean energy all the way. And when it comes to that, I want to then argue with them, not argue, but ask a question. Why, if it's all about clean energy, what's your issue then with nuclear? Right? Because that's a whole nother big question
Yeah,
out
that's
there.
that's
Maybe,
another thing where there are inconsistencies in the left leaning arguments that the anti nukes are not. It's not entirely rational. Um,
exactly. So that's
that
my whole
resistance.
point. But
Hmm.
meanwhile, so they're saying they want this future. I'm like, that future could be here right now. There's a technology we know of right now. If we start building them in no time. In the meantime, we use the fossil the. So, but anyway, my point is, what I want to make clear of is I will not stand and watch people die today
Yeah,
so
you've
that
made that
we
point.
achieve a future. That's
You've
all. That's all I want to
you've
make clear today.
completely made that point, and I'm just saying it's not good enough to be right. You have to be effective, and to be effective with activists, they want to hear from you that you are all in for that result that they seek in whatever is that distant future, and that the moment anything comes available that they should be supporting and comes your way, you will adopt it as soon as it's there, provided it's a better replacement for the health of the people than well, but you're replacing the propane for the world at that point. But they need to hear that you're on board with that, rather than argue against them. Hold on. Rather than argue against them, saying, I'm not going to do this, I'm going to use propane, fuck you. Okay? Then you become their enemy, and then nothing gets done. Okay? I'm quoting my father here, who worked in city government in the 1960s during the civil rights movement, and that influence stuck with me as an administrator, as someone who does it interpersonally, as a manager, all of this. It's not good enough to be right. And so, yeah, you navigate that. You're taking the high and mighty road. I don't want my women to die. Okay, we're going to use propane, and it sounds like a very regressive stance. Rather than, I can't wait until you give me an alternative. So why don't you keep working on that? Here's my phone number. Keep working on it, and the minute you have an alternative, you give me a call, and we'll replace the propane.
And
If
which
they
part
heard
of that?
that from you, there'd be no arguments.
Well,
I claim.
actually, they hear that from me all the time. Do they hear that from me all the time? So two things is the conversation stops when they hear about still having to put one more carbon in the atmosphere. It stops right there. And
One
and
molecule.
yeah, and then another thing is also then them having to address the nuclear solution also. I'm like, the world we want, nuclear could get us there too. So what's your point with nuclear? And then when you see them being like, we're just anti-nukes for the sake of being, then you see, so my point
Yeah,
is at
their arguments are not entirely rational there. That's
it
right.
makes no sense. So, and
Uh-huh.
I'm not gonna be led by irrational people on their desire to only God knows what. So meanwhile, we know how to save African women today, and we also know how to have clean energy today. If they only stood out of the way, we could save the women of today, and we can get to cleaner energy in a few decades. So my point is, at some point, I refuse to be under the diktat of highly irrational people who at some point I'm wondering if it's even the climate that they care about at some
If
point.
you stood in
But
front of the UN and said, I don't want my women to die, you don't have an easy, inexpensive solution for me to save their lives. And until that happens, I'm going to use propane. And anything else is a death sentence for my women in Africa. Okay. And they'll say, well, it's a death sentence for the whole world. Then you say, if it is not realistic, nor is it ever likely to happen until innovations work their way to Africa to help solve this problem. And you'll get a standing ovation in the UN. But if you say I'm using propane because that's then that with an attitude, no, I'm trying to make you effective here.
no, it is
Which is,
funny.
and it's being effective isn't always being high and mighty,
Neil,
right?
Neil, I love it, and we're on the same track, though. I think you just haven't seen me when I talk about this because it's exactly the place I come from. It's like this clean energy. Yes, we're all for it. I thought I told you this, but in the meantime, we need to cater to first things first. Let us avoid these deaths that we can easily avoid by using coal. It's from your my fellow my activist friend.
I'm suggesting you say we will use anything to replace it the moment it becomes affordable to us. So get to work on that. And here's my phone number.
There you go.
So
Okay,
rather than dig your heels into the propane, you actually pass the baton to them. All right. And now it's a tennis serve. It's like now it's in their court. Oh, okay. She's ready to have what we do. She's ready. Well, let's redouble this effort and then I'll give her a call. And here's Mr. Fusion, home energy source, or whatever.
can we add nuclear to that? Can we add nuclear to when you're ready to adopt nuclear? Call me. We'll use it. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But I'm not kidding. So Neil, this has been an amazing conversation. There's only one more question I have for you, and it's about: do you, Neil, believe? Because I ask this to
I don't
all my
believe
guests.
that's not a belief thing. I don't. That's not
I'm gonna put you on the spot, Neil.
fine.
I'm still gonna do it because that's what I ask a lot of my guests. It's
Okay,
important.
go.
It's our African. This is gonna be mostly for an African audience, right?
Fine.
So, do you believe that Africans can become more prosperous in this century?
Oh, but definitely. When I look over the history of, before 1910, the United States was kind of a backwoods farmland country. We had a couple of big cities, but they were kind of smelly and dirty, and they were not very sophisticated, not like London or Paris, for example. And the country was built within a century to become a leader in the world in science and technology because there was values placed on research and engineering and math and the STEM fields. Okay, so and that happened within a century. Before then, Europe basically led the world. All right, they embraced science and technology early. All right, the Industrial Revolution hit them first, and that fueled their power over the rest of the world. Okay, a lot of it was worked towards health and security and wealth, but the rest was like hegemony. Okay, that's how they chose to use their power of influence and wealth. You go back 1,000 years, the golden age of Islam out of Baghdad, with major advances in science and engineering, astronomy and medicine. 2/3 of all and navigation. 2/3 of all stars in the night sky that have names have Arabic names,
Yeah.
traceable from that period. You go back thousands of years before that, you have Egypt as one of the greatest cultures civilizations has ever seen. The pyramids were the tallest structures, stable structures, to exist in this world until the Eiffel Tower. Okay? So all I'm declaring here is no one country, no one region has eternal rights to leading the world. It's a combination of how enlightened is your leadership, how what are the motivations for doing so, and they can easily happen within a century. Africa, with the resources that are built in just to the land and the people and the diversity, um, I don't see why Africa wouldn't lead the world for millennia to come. And so, yeah, and with the United States just looking from the sidelines, that's my read of history tells me nothing in principle will prevent that. Look what China did. It wasn't many decades ago before you know the stereotype of the Chinese peasant working in the field that was kind of true. Okay, China decided we're going to redouble our interest in science and technology and engineering and math, and they sent their people abroad to get educated. Initially, they would stay. Then they came back. Now they educate their own people. Okay, they don't have to learn their science and engineering in other countries. They do it in house in the country. China says we're going to put a person in orbit, bada bing. They put a person in orbit. We're going to build a space station, bada bing. So we're going to put people on the moon. That spooked us. We haven't been on the moon in 50 years. And all of a sudden, hey, let's put people on the moon. It's kind of the right time. Well, why is it the right? Oh, China is doing it. All right. So we're seeing a shift in science and technology to China. And so I I don't see why things can't shift to Africa.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so
Overdue,
much.
even.
Thank
Okay.
you. It's overdue. Thank you so much. Neil, is there anything that you wanted to bring up that we didn't get to bring up,
Yeah,
or
just
any?
a simple thing. A lot of again, a lot of what I shared with you are derived from thinking that went into the Starry Messenger cosmic perspectives on civilization, or what I shared with you in that book. And so in there, it's fully footnoted and there's precision in the communication, even if especially when we were talking about Republicans and Democrats, it's numerically accurate in those, how many states out of 10 were red or voted blue, who went one way or another, which presidents had which budgets. It's all in there. So I invite those who never felt comfortable assigning someone else's political platform to their own views. The chapter in that book called Conflict and Resolution is all about how to apply your own rational thinking to information so that you can decide you are your own individual,
Yes.
which we all
Yes.
are ultimately.
Ultimately. No, this has been really fun, Neil. I knew I could count on you to, just take things back from a more fair way, a view of looking at things. It doesn't matter where people land in terms of, in the end, what they perceive to be. It's, I think at the end of the day, there's just a process that needs to be had. So
Excellent, and thank you for noting that. And like I said, if what we have seen in the last 300 years is that science and technology brings nations out of poverty.
yeah.
So it's a matter of bringing more science and more technology to Africa, even though it's hugely agricultural, of course. Even agriculture benefits from applications of science and technology in ways that would not have otherwise been possible.
Mhm.
So, yeah,
Very
I look
true.
forward to that.
Well, we're gonna have you come to Africa. You are not without knowing, but you have a huge fan base over there. So hopefully, these all of these young people, they need to see you for real at some point. So
Yeah,
I hope we can.
half the country's young. I'm all in. Okay.
Yes, I
I
think
mean,
we're
and
gonna have to.
half the continent is young. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I'll. It will be my greatest pleasure to work something out. So let's make it a goal,
All
and
right, keep
we'll
me on
see.
your list. Be
We'll
delighted.
do.
Okay.
We'll do. Well, Neil, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Okay. All right.
All right.